Hello one and all, Chris from 6++ here and welcome to another tactical tip video. This time I am going to be talking all about the Yncarne, who is obviously appearing in a lot of the current Eldari lists. Not only is it an incredible model, but it is perhaps one of the most fun models or units that you can use in the entire game. There are so many possibilities, and in this video I'm going to be talking kind of about the basic rules of the Yncarne, how best to leverage those. I'm going to be talking about how to use the Yncarne aggressively, how to use her defensively. I'm going to cover some set plays that you can be trying to manufacture in the game. And I'll also be touching on how best she can be used in certain matchups. Hopefully you enjoy it, and if you do, please consider giving us a like and a subscribe, as it really does help. Let's get incarning. Okay, so let's get going with the basics then. So in terms of a stat line, a 10-inch move is pretty nice. She has fly, although obviously we know fly is quite heavily nerfed. Toughness 10 puts her at that nice bracket where some of the infantry anti-tank is kind of at strength 9, so she's been wounding on 5s. Armor save of a 2-up now compared to the 3-up she had in 9th edition is huge, especially with how easy it is to gain the benefits of cover. It really improves her durability. 12 wounds is pretty nice. The 4-up in is there as well. Leadership 6-up, and then OC 3, which is kind of pretty standard and in line with a lot of the Eldar tanks and that sort of thing. In terms of range weapon, obviously she used to have that flamer that hit everyone. No such thing anymore. But it's 12 inches, it's D6 plus 3, torrent, strength 7 minus 1, and it is D3 damage, so it can punch up slightly. And it also ignores cover, which is obviously quite helpful. In terms of combat, the big thing she was known for in 9th was that she ignored invulnerables and had 6 attacks. She has now lost that, so it's only 5 attacks, hitting on 2s. Strength 12 is a nice break point. Minus 4 is really good, especially into marine bodies. The old D3 plus 3 is now D6 plus 1, which is very swingy. I've had games where I've gone into a Tyranid monster and I've done 5 wounds, and then the next turn I've gone into a different Tyranid monster and done 22 wounds. So that is something to be careful of, especially if you do roll a couple of 1s when you're hitting, because obviously you can only re-roll 1, and with the wound roll, so it can definitely go wrong. So I would say she's not as consistent anymore. And a sweep attack of 10 attacks is there as well, with the nice little bit of AP. But nearly all of the time you will be using the 5 attacks. And then finally, the extra rule is that she halves damage, and that is where you're really getting that durability spike. And in a lot of cases, it will take most of an enemy's army to try and put her down, and that is something that definitely plays to her advantage. But of course, the reason you are taking the Yncarne is not for any of those reasons. You are taking the Yncarne because of inevitable death. So let's break that down. Okay, once per phase, very important. You need to be thinking in each phase, how are you going to be going about or go through the process of getting her into the place. You can't just go, oh, I'll just teleport her now, why not? Because it might turn out there's a better opportunity to teleport her later. So you do have to always be considering that. So once per phase, if this model is on the battlefield, when another unit is destroyed, that is your units and the enemy units. Okay, just after removing the last model in that unit. Now, this is something very interesting actually, because it used to be before removing the last model, place her as close as you can to that model. It is now after, which creates this interesting discussion on we've got to set this model up, the Yncarne, up as close as possible to where that destroyed model was. Now, where actually is that? So let's say you kill a knight and you are going to teleport your Yncarne over to where that knight died. Well, where exactly are you putting the Yncarne? Smack bang in the middle of the knight? Base to base of like edge to edge, as if the knight was still there? Can you put it anywhere? So it's actually an interesting dynamic, and I think it probably needs a bit more discussion, because I think a lot of people have just been assuming it's the same as old. I know I was, until I kind of had another proper read of this. So just something to be mindful of. But yeah, you move this model to as close to where the dead model was as possible. So that realistically just means in the center of it. Okay, and whereas before your opponent, you had to be within an inch of where that last model died. Now there is no such stipulation. You get to go and get to be placed down. You just got to be as close as possible and not in engagement range. That does create a huge amount of opportunity and possibilities, and that's going to be a big thing that we are discussing. So, important things to note here. You can teleport and charge. Okay, that is another one of the reasons why the Yncarne is so powerful. Now, you never used to be able to do that. You can teleport and heroically intervene, which is also obviously really strong. And going back to that point about you've just got to go as close as possible. Well, if you consider things like infiltrators, which stop anything being set up within 12 inches, that creates, if you kill a unit which is within an infiltrator bubble, she can't land where that model died. So she's going to have to be outside of that 12 inches of those infiltrators. That creates a huge amount of possibilities of where she can go. And obviously, I'm sure you'll work out this video is all about utilizing the teleport aspect to the best of its ability. So, using the Yncarne defensively. So just a couple of ideas here that you want to, or make sure you are aware of. I think the most standard thing is, let's say you've got a unit out on an objective, the opposition line up a few shots, shoot and kill that unit. That's going to deny you some primary. Well, what you can do at that point is teleport your Yncarne over and back onto that point where that unit died. You are now still in control of that objective. Obviously, sometimes your enemy might be planning a charge, or they might have a lot of big guns pointing on that objective still, and then the teleport might not work. But I think this is one of the most obvious plays for the Yncarne. It can also be used to try and stop cards like area denial, because they're killing something in the middle, and the Yncarne can come across and stop that. So always be thinking, how can I keep moving the Yncarne to potentially stop my opponent scoring points, or score some myself. The other thing you can think about is teleporting her to stop consolidations. Obviously, you can only consolidate now if you're going to go into engagement range of the enemy, and if that's not possible, then you can do it if it gets you onto an objective. So if they kill a unit and they're hoping to consolidate onto an objective, and you teleport your Yncarne over, then all of a sudden you might have been able to generate a situation where no longer can they consolidate onto the objective. They have to choose to not consolidate, or consolidate into the Yncarne, which isn't a particularly fun time for quite a few units out there. So that is just another thing to be aware of. Using the Yncarne aggressively. So, first of all, it's your turn. You need to have a plan of what you want to do with the Yncarne in that turn. How are you going to move her? Also, you probably at this point want to be thinking, how are you going to get her back to the kind of a safe spot? But as you do your movement, as you line up your shots and work out where you want to put your shots, be thinking, right, is there a way that I can get the Yncarne over to the enemy deployment zone, for example, and maybe that'll influence how you line up your shooting. I had a game recently where I had to try and kill a dreadnought which was hidden, and the Void Weaver whiffed, and I was like, oh, this is going to stop me from scoring, bring it down. But I was able to kill a unit near there from a different angle, and then teleport the Yncarne over, which gave me a flame shot into the dreadnought, which took away its final final wound. So absolutely have a clear plan and maybe a backup plan as well. Obviously, the most logical and clear way of using the Yncarne is you shoot something far away, you kill it, let's say with a fire prism or something, and the Yncarne gets to teleport over there and then gets to charge. And that is kind of the way that she's incredibly effective at the moment, because she's very good at wreaking havoc in enemy deployment zones. So things you want to consider: when are you going to shoot the Yncarne? Are you going to shoot the Yncarne before you teleport her? Or are you going to shoot the Yncarne after she's teleported? You know, that flamer is pretty handy. So just have a think about that. You don't want to waste the shooting. So sequencing your shooting of all your units is quite important. And then the other thing you obviously need to be thinking about is how are you getting her back? And we will talk about that a bit later. But you've definitely got to have that thought. Now, in Eldar armies, you're taking Shadow Spectres, you're taking Warp Spiders, because they're good at going and deploying teleport homers. They're good at scoring behind enemy lines, all those sorts of things. The reality is that that unit is going to die once it's over there. So in some ways, if you didn't have the Yncarne, you might be thinking, well, I'll just move them over here, it doesn't really matter, or I'll put them here for a move block, etc. What you actually want to be thinking about, if you've got the Yncarne, is, well, how can I go about making it so that if he kills this unit, it's going to cause a lot of trouble if the Yncarne then gets to teleport over. It could be that you go and stick some Warp Spiders right near their objective, or right near their little home field castle. It could be that you place them one side of or kind of on a side of a wall on an L shape, so she can pop around the corner, all those sorts of things. But really be careful about thinking, where do you actually want the Yncarne to appear if that unit dies. I played into GSC recently, and the Warp Spiders went and sat right by that deployment zone, or that big L and the home field objective, and it just caused problems for the GSC player, because he had to think about, well, if I kill this unit, suddenly Yncarne's here. GSC don't want to be defending their home field with lots of stuff. So yeah, definitely think about, if I'm sacrificing this unit, it's going to die. Think about, well, is this the place I want my Yncarne to appear, and maybe adjust accordingly. In terms of indirect, we have the Night Spinners and we have the D-Cannons, and they can be quite good at picking up smaller units to create opportunities for the Yncarne to appear. So it might be a small unit on a flank, because the Yncarne likes to just cause havoc on the edges of deployment zones. Conversely, it might well be right in the heart of their deployment zone. Get the Yncarne over there and cause maximum damage into something that they have, which is really important to keep, for example. It might well be that you're sacrificing the Yncarne at that point, so that's something you'd have to be considering. But obviously, indirect is really powerful, and that's why you're starting to see 2 Night Spinners in a list, because although that's 340 points, actually that's going to do a lot of work at generating Yncarne opportunities. And finally, another thing you can consider is using your opponent's Overwatch against them. So going back to that GSC game I was talking about, I put some Warp Spiders down really close to the enemy's deployment zone, because what I wanted him to do was Overwatch and kill the spiders so the Yncarne could teleport over, so then I could charge into some manticores which were in his backfield. As it was, he did Overwatch, and unfortunately he left one Warp Spider alive, which wasn't ideal. But those sorts of things, again, are definitely something you want to be considering when you're deep striking down and that sort of thing. So, having spoken generally about the Yncarne, let's have a look at a couple of set plays that you could kind of try and manufacture, or sort of a playbook, if you will. So, I actually spoke about this in a previous video. Check it out if you haven't already, where I talk about 3 Eldari combos. The Yncarne can go into a group or go into a unit with a character. She can use the stratagem to give herself precision, and then she can kill that character. There are lots of armies that have very strong characters at the moment that they're relying on, and she's quite good at killing characters like that, because generally, especially with the fate dice, she only needs to get one thing through and she'll one-shot character, which you'd hope to do if she's usually hitting on twos, wounding on twos into your medium level characters. So that's 4 or 5 4-up invulns they've got to make. You're going to get through 1 or 2, use your fate dice, that character is now dead. But the beauty of this is once you've done that, and you've killed that character, you can then teleport because you've killed a unit, or a unit has died. If we remember, you can only teleport out of engagement, so you can't teleport into engagement, which means this unit that you were in combat with, you now get to teleport out of engagement range with. They can't activate because they haven't declared a charge, and then you don't get hit back. And then in the perfect world, maybe you'll then go and kill something elsewhere using combat, and then she can teleport all the way to safety. So we know consolidation is quite restricted now. Something to bear in mind is that when you kill that unit, you can use that consolidation, or sorry, you can use the teleport to basically get a bit of a bigger consolidate. Depending on where they remove the final model from, it could be that you start off an objective, but then are able to teleport onto an objective just because of how they've moved that model, the final model of the enemy unit. So just something to bear in mind when you've used the Yncarne, or when you've killed a unit and they've pulled the last model. Think, well, can the Yncarne now maybe sneak onto an objective, be a bit better hidden for a phantasm next turn, all those sorts of things. Just something to bear in mind. Now this one's quite fun. When you declare a charge, you can declare a charge with the Yncarne and obviously just charge into a unit, and that could be on the left hand side of the table. And on the right hand side of the table, you can declare a charge with something else. Let's say it's a solitaire, for example. Okay, so on the left hand side of the table, the Yncarne's gone into something that you don't really care about. On the right hand side of the table, the solitaire's gone into a unit with a character. Solitaire has precision, the solitaire kills that character. Now you can teleport the Yncarne all the way across the board over to that unit. Let's remember, we have to be outside of engagement range. However, we declared a charge with the Yncarne earlier, which means that she is still eligible to pile in. So although she has teleported all the way over and she is outside of engagement range, she can now activate, pile in towards the closest, and punch that unit. Okay, so that is it's quite a fun way of getting her all the way across the board if you have kind of like a killy combat unit like the solitaire. I think that's a really cool trick that's obviously doesn't happen very often, but is very cool. Another thing, tank shock. Eldars have lots of vehicles, fire prisms, hornets, war walkers, etc. If you go into a unit which is nearly dead and tank shot them to death, that's done in the charge phase. So what does that mean? That means the Yncarne can now teleport over there, which means the Yncarne, having not declared a charge elsewhere, can now declare a charge into a new target. So that's another way of moving her around in the charge phase. And finally, if you're using hornets, they have a move which, or an ability, which means that when they fly over something, they can drop bombs. If you drop those bombs and do some mortal wounds, which on average is 3 mortal wounds and kills a unit, you could then teleport the Yncarne over to wherever that was, and she could then still get to move, shoot, charge. Okay, so that's another way of giving her extra move and that sort of thing. Shout out to the Art of War Discord where some of those set plays were mentioned. We had a really good discussion on that, so thank you if you offered something up. Right, almost as important as getting her in, which is getting her out. So how can you do it? So the old classic way, when your enemies used to be taking behind enemy lines all the time for secondaries in 9th, etc., and you were taking combat units, was you would have the Yncarne fight and kill something, and then the another unit would fight and kill something, and then she would teleport away before she kind of got hit. That's the classic way. Obviously, in this world, it's actually a bit trickier because we're not taking many combat units. It's quite a rarity to be able to go and kind of take out those or have 2-3 deadly combats at a time. So this is obviously a lot trickier, but it is something to bear in mind if you have something like the Yncarne and the Solitaire in play. They can certainly be used to bounce stuff around. What's more likely these days is that you're going to Overwatch. If you've got something like a guided Wraith Knight, they are very good at picking up things because you're kind of guaranteeing, you'd hope, one with the Fate Dice 2 6s. You've got a very good chance of picking up tanks or small infantry squads with the with Overwatch from the Wraith Knight. So that's the more likely way you're going to get rid of or be able to move the Yncarne, which means that maybe when it's your previous shooting phase, what you might want to be doing is intentionally leaving a unit on 1 or 2 wounds, especially one that's in comparable safety. So as soon as they move, they declare that that unit's going to move with 1 or 2 wounds. You can Overwatch, kill it, and then the Yncarne can teleport over safely. So that's probably the more likely way in the current meta that you're going to manage to do that. And finally, just bear in mind terrain when you're teleporting her around, when you're fighting things, when you're piling and consolidating. Be thinking, is there a way I can get close to terrain so that I could maybe Phantasm next turn behind it? Don't just try and leave her out in the middle to say, come on, if you think you're hard enough, because as we're about to discuss, she does die. She certainly does die. So that is still something to bear in mind. Just think about the terrain and where you can kind of go, etc. Right, finally, matchup guidance. So, she is tanky, yes. However, she is not that tanky. If they're putting really high quality, low volume shots into her, well, she's got 4 up in Vine, she's halving damage. That's great. However, devastating wounds, mortal wounds of any kind are absolutely brutal. I've played into Grey Knights, and Vortex did a number on her. I've played into Thousand Suns with Doombolt. That's pretty brutal. She doesn't have any mortal wound protection, so that devastating wounds from infantry guns, they really add up. I played into Deathwatch with Plasma Inceptors recently. They whiz through her when overcharging. So what you need to do in the matchup is be thinking, right, what have they got that is actually going to hurt her? 2 damage stuff is not really going. It's going to take a long time to get through because it obviously goes down to 1 damage. So just bear that in mind, and that will help you maybe think about where you want to kind of put her. And so you go into a game, you want to be thinking, right, what's going to hurt me? What can I kind of get into? A lot of the times, you don't want to be sending her straight away into the breach, so to speak. You want to be using her to clear up the edges, be a pain on the flanks of a deployment zone and that sort of thing. Because opponents don't want to have to come and deal with her because they know they're going to have to put a lot into her. So I've played probably like 12, 13 games using her now, and she certainly has a role in some of the big matchups. So for example, in tonight's, she should, I say the word should here, pick up a baby knight on her own in combat. So that is that's kind of where you want to be using her. As soon as with her only 5 attacks, as soon as she's going into a big knight and potentially wounding on 4s, then actually that just suddenly becomes really swingy. But a big knight you'd hope to be picking up, especially if she's managed to flame it. So going to the baby knights would be my advice there. In terms of GSC, she is very good at getting into the deployment zone. If she gets into that deployment zone, as I mentioned earlier, she then does not want to be or the GSC player do not want to be having to send lots of units back to try and kill her. And then she can just have a field day in your opponent's deployment zone. So GSC matchup, she's very good if you can get her over to their deployment zone. And also she's very good at destroying blips because of that. You know, you can kill things near the blips, teleport her over, destroy those blips. So that is certainly something to be thinking of as well, using Yncarne to get rid of those blips. Other matchups, maybe, so for example, Custodes, she's certainly going to struggle a bit because of she doesn't ignore invulnerables anymore. So that's one where you're going to have to be using her to try and kill the small units and not the giant, massive blobs. She doesn't do too much there, and she will just get annihilated on the fight back. But yeah, I think the most important takeaway here is that you really need to be thinking about, as you go into the game, what she's going to be most useful for, and then don't just get excited and teleport her over because just because you can, really. So there we are. Hopefully that's been interesting and informative for you. Please, in the comments below, just leave a little something about how you've used the Yncarne. We all love our Yncarne stories. We're all very proud of that time we bounced the Yncarne around and did this thing, and our opponent thought we were some sort of Warhammer god. So yeah, let's hear your best Yncarne stories. Maybe you've got a play that I've not included, and pop that in. And conversely, if you are one of those long-suffering players against the Yncarne, hopefully this video has helped you to be a bit more aware. Obviously, the Yncarne is a lot harder to deal with now because you can't deny her actually teleporting. But you can certainly be thinking about, well, if they do teleport here, I've got my big guns ready to try and deal with her if she does. But yeah, I think my best piece of advice is just always be thinking about the Yncarne. It's tiring, but you've got to, otherwise she will wreak havoc. That's all for now. Thank you very much, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.